So I wanted to start with the human rights bodies that are sort of like relevant to the work that we're doing. So we have the General Assembly at the top, which, and then you see the arrow. I'm going to start with the left first. In the yellow, it says adopts human rights treaties. Let me actually move this little thing so it's not in my way. Yes, adopts human rights treaties. And then those human rights treaties, in order, the implementation of those human rights treaties are, if they're implemented through these treaty bodies, which are usually these committees. So that's on this left side. On the right side, the General Assembly also created the Human Rights Council. And this is like where all of the human rights work is happening. Obviously, like I said, the way it's structured, there are other areas where there are reviews on human rights and things like that. But for our purposes, in terms of the mechanism that we directly focus on, it's under the Human Rights Council. So then the Human Rights Council, under the Human Rights Council is the Universal Periodic Review, which I'll talk about a little bit. And this is just a review of the country's human rights record, but it's undertaken by other countries. And then the special procedures. Now, this is really important because the special procedures is what a lot of people are really, folks say is really the meat, the bodies that can actually go out and be effective, can act quickly, doesn't have to wait for a review process, but can act sort of more independently and quickly. So this is, and I'll try to keep going back to this to help folks understand. And then I have the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights sort of to the right here. In the upper right, it says OHCHR. And I'm trying to slow down a little for the interpreters. OHCHR. I will explain a little bit about what they do, but for the purposes of this, think of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights as the body that helps to implement all of this. So it helps the Human Rights Council actually, do the reviews that they need to do on human rights. It helps the special procedures. And I'll go a little bit more into that. Now zooming in, so you see I have the special procedures on the lower right hand, and I have the Human Rights Council. Now this next slide has the Human Rights Council. So now we are where the Human Rights Council is. The three things that I have highlighted in yellow, these are the mechanisms that this coalition primarily deals with, or the bodies that this coalition primarily deals with. So there's a Human Rights Council. As a result, like the Human Rights Council passes resolutions, and these resolutions create these special procedures. And when I say special procedures, I'll go into it more, but it's like the special rapporteurs, the working groups of experts. These are all created by the Human Rights Council, and they do it by passing a resolution. That's how they create it. And the Human Rights Council created EMLER. EMLER is the body that this coalition is focused on. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more, but I want you to see how it's not quite under a special procedure, which means it's a little bit of a hybrid. It has all of the powers of a special procedure, but it also has some additional powers, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more. And then I put some other things here, like the Durban process and the working group of experts of people of African descent. I'm gonna later have a list of, I think there are a bunch of processes that can be confusing to people that focus on Africans and people of African descent. And this mechanism is focused on Africans and people of African descent. So you have, the working group of experts of people of African descent. You have the International Decade for People of African Descent. You have the Durban Declaration and Program of Action you have EMLER. So I'm not going to go into details in all of those, but I'm going to list them, and you all will have copies of this. You have a copy of this or access to this, so that if you wanted to do a deep dive on your own, just looking at this, you can. So I'm going to pause there to allow for the interpreters to interpret. Okay. Here, close this. And again, I'm going to talk about the Human Rights Council, EMLER, and OHCHR, but just know that there are other processes that are focusing on human rights, and the members, and the reason why I want to mention this, because it would be valuable to you to engage in all of them if you can, as many as possible. We're doing this, but there are other coalitions working on other procedures. Okay. So again, like I said, UNARC's focus is EMLER. EMLER stands for the International Independent Expert Mechanism to advance racial justice in the context of law enforcement. OHCHR is the Office of the High Commissioner for the Human Rights, and HRC is the Human Rights Council. So these are the three bodies that we in this coalition tend to focus on. Leave it up there for a little so folks can see it. Okay, next. So let me talk a little bit about the Human Rights Council. That's the larger body that passes resolutions, that creates the special procedures and created EMLER. They can alert the world to human rights violations. The Human Rights Council can bring attention to specific situations on the ground. So the advice is to be thinking about this, how you as an advocate who is doing this work on the ground can use the Human Rights Council as a tool. Like many have used it for, if there are oppressive laws passed, or if there are specific cases that are considered, really egregious, this is where you could go to uplift the issue. So alert the world to human rights violations. It can bring attention to specific situations on the ground, monitors all countries in the UN on their record, on their human rights record. States in the Human Rights Council, there's 47 countries at a time, and they roughly, every time they rotate, it's something like a third of the countries are changed. They adopt resolution that becomes special procedures. So they created the Special Rapporteur on Racism, the Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty, the Working Group of Experts for People of African Descent. Just pausing for folks to read this too. Okay, now let me talk about special procedures. Obviously, this is not everything that they can do. There's whole classes just on special procedures, but this is just a little bit of a taste. So they can make statements. So say you have an issue happening in your country or in your region, and you want to bring awareness to it. This special procedures could do that. You could go to a working group, you could go to a special rapporteur that deals with that particular issue, or sometimes it's that particular country, and you can ask them to act. And it can be powerful to have a statement from the UN about your issue. So they can make statements, they can issue press releases, they can increase awareness, they can mobilize quickly. They can be, and when I say mobilize quickly, there are other processes that are actually really important processes, but they might meet only, have a review only once every 4.5 to 5 years. So then you have to wait to present your issue or to, I mean, there's other processes that you can do, but generally speaking, those bodies are not as quick as the special procedures can be, because they don't necessarily need permission or anything like that, or consensus to like make a statement or issue a press release. These special procedures can be thematic. Like I said, it could be focused on people of African descent and law enforcement. That's a theme. Or it could be country specific, if there's a specific human rights violation happening in a specific country. Individual experts are called special rapporteurs, or you'll have a team of experts and they're called working groups. And usually it will be like 5 people in the team of experts, or you'll have one person who is the special rapporteur, but they are all independent experts. So they're independent, and you know, the idea is that they would be unbiased and really be able to investigate and be impartial. So these special procedures is a good way to really get your issue kind of like increase awareness for your issue. The other thing that special procedures can do is they can do country visits, which can be really powerful, where they go to the country where the violation is happening. They can meet with governments, they can meet with people who are impacted, other stakeholders. It can be really powerful. And you'll see that is actually happening with the EMLER mechanism. They can conduct urgent actions. They can write letters to governments. And then they prepare reports that are presented to the Human Rights Council, because remember, the Human Rights Council created them. So they have to report on the progress. Like I said before, they can bring attention to specific cases or laws. They have secured the release of human rights defenders. They've done a lot of things like that just by using the tools that they have. So that's special procedures. Now I want to talk about EMLER. So remember I said EMLER is a little bit different. So EMLER is the International Independent Expert Mechanism to advance racial justice in the context of law enforcement. It is a hybrid between a special procedure and a commission of inquiry. And my understanding of a commission of inquiry is it's an investigative body. Something happens, it does an investigation, it's going in, it's trying to figure out what happened. And so it has a little bit more affirmative power. So think about all of the powers that I just mentioned that special procedures has, and then add to that like this additional power. Like I said, it has all the powers of the special procedure. It centers the experiences of impacted communities. This is really important. The impacted communities are a part of the process, leading this process. There is something called an advanced interactive dialogue that happens every year around the report that they create. And impacted individuals are a part of that dialogue at the UN, which is something that's very new and unique to this particular body. As I said before, it focuses on Africans and people of African descent. It can look at not just what's happening now, but what's really key is that it can look at root causes of these current injustices. For example, they can look at the histories of colonialism and the transatlantic slave trade, and its connection to policing and the oppression of Africans and people of African descent. As I said, it can act immediately when given information. So all of the powers that I said that they had, writing letters to government, doing press releases, all of that stuff they can do. And just bringing that visibility has actually been really important. And there's some other thing, another thing I wanted to mention that I don't have on here, I think I don't say it yet, but they also have to do an annual report every September. So when they're doing these country visits and people are sending their submissions and all of that, they're collecting all of that to be put in the report. And then that they have to submit that report to the Human Rights Council and also so does the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. So there's two reports on this same issue that goes to the Human Rights Council. They submit it in June, but it's actually, like sort of public in August, September, and the dialogue happens around the report in September. Yeah, so EMLER can also do visits as I said, like the special procedures, but they could also do regional visits and virtual consultations. I'm going to talk a little bit, we have the dates for their virtual consultations for this year. We have information about their country visits, which I'm going to talk about. And last year, they did a regional visit in South America, where they went to Chile and they invited the stakeholders, impacted people and governments from 10 countries in South America to go to Chile to actually have a regional consultation that will be included in the findings will be included in this upcoming report. So that's it on EMLER. We're almost there. It's a lot. I'm talk about the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Is a secretariat for the Human Rights Council. And usually when we say secretariat, we mean they support the work of that body. So they help to implement the work of that body. They're not the only implementation, but that's what they do. They support that. The Commissioner's Office provides expertise and support to investigative mechanisms. I'm talking about this in terms of an investigative mechanism like EMLER, including advising on mandate development, investigation methodology, and applicable international law, setting up secretariats with specific specialist staff, and providing administrative, logistical, and security support. I'm gonna pause. And as I said before, this office also does an annual report on the same topic as EMLER. So this is good to know because you get two opportunities to submit your information. And what's important about submitting to both is that EMLER might highlight certain things in your report, and then OHCHR might highlight other things. So it's important to get your information out that as much as possible. So they're a very important office. Now I want to mention the other processes, and I'll mention these briefly because I could go into it and it could be. So the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent was created out of the International Decade for People of African Descent. So the UN designated 2015 to 2024 as the decade for people of African descent. And the idea is that this group of people will be highlighted, and there would be all of this work around addressing the condition of people of African descent around the world. So one of the things that was created from that was the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent. And they had their first meeting in December of last year. I'm gonna pause. And again, like I said, that was 2015 to 2024. And then another process, which is completely separate, is what I mentioned before, which is the working group of experts on people of African descent. They are they're kind of a special procedure, but they were not created in the same way that the other special procedures were created. They were created from the Durban process. So folks, not to go too much into it, but if folks have heard of the Durban Declaration and Program of Action, it's the seminal document on this, like basically the core document on race at the UN. And it was created from this long process. And in 2001, there was a World Conference Against Racism in Durban, South Africa. And this is when this document was created. And also this is when sort of this document kind of laid out the call for reparations. So the working group of experts of people of African descent was created from this process. I'm mentioning these because these are also bodies that are focused on Africans and people of African descent. And because that is our work too, it's important that we understand what else is out there. And to know that these bodies are actually working together, are meeting, or understand and kind of know what is happening within the other bodies and things like that. But they are separate processes. And we might share information about this, but we don't directly work in these two processes. And pause. Okay, almost there, almost done. The last thing I wanted to mention is the Universal Periodic Review and the treaty bodies. And the reason why I'm mentioning them together, even though, let me actually go back. I'm gonna go back to the first slide that so if you look here, we have the General Assembly at the top. The General Assembly created the Human Rights Council on the right, and also adopts the human rights treaties, the General Assembly. So these are different processes. The treaty bodies are over here on the left, straight from the General Assembly. The Human Rights Council, special procedures, and sorry, not special procedures, the Universal Periodic Review is on the right. It comes through the Human Rights Council, but I'm talking about them together just based on process. So let me go back. And this is the last slide. You guys can ask questions. And so for the Universal Periodic Review, it is a review. Certain countries come up for review every 4 to 5 years, like 4.5 to 5 years. They are reviewed on their human rights record. It is other countries that are reviewing them. So you can imagine that it's highly political. Advocates' role in this process is to advocate to certain countries to ask them to put pressure on the country they want to put pressure on. But advocates themselves are not directly engaging in this process. So as you can imagine, I'm fast. So the treaty bodies, the committees for these treaty bodies. So for these, governments must ratify the treaty. Like for example, the Convention Against Torture, there's like the treaties on race, like the CERD treaty. There are lots of different treaties that governments must ratify. Once the government ratifies that treaty, as a part of the process, they also they go up for review. I think it's also every 4 something years, between 4 and 5 years. And this process, civil society can engage more directly in. They can submit shadow reports. They can participate in the review of the government. But the government must cooperate, meaning it must submit a report to the body that then the civil society can sort of like respond to, engage with. And a lot of times, sometimes governments don't submit a report because they don't want to be reviewed. We also have Gay McDougall, who is a member of the CERD committee, and the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, who's on the call, not to call you out, but just wanted to acknowledge that, and that the CERD is a treaty body, and it's very valuable to participate in these processes too. Again, like I said, at the end of last year, Brazil was reviewed under the CERD treaty. And many of our Brazilian members participated in that process. It's another way to get your issue out there. So I'm gonna stop here. I'll leave this up for a second. And I will take questions, because I know this was a lot.